That didn't work at all. Hey! Let's talk. Mostly me. Hi everybody. It's 3:30. It's 1:30, right? I should be talking. I'm not shutting you up prematurely, I think. So I'm going to be talking about Perl 5 and what's new in it. I have given talks like this for the last couple years. The first one I did was Perl 5.10 for people who are not totally insane. And the premise was Perl 5.10 was huge. Just huge number of new behaviors. And many of them were really, really cool and useful. And many of them were cool and seemed useful. And many of them you wouldn't know what the heck to do with. You know, they're just like these crazy esoteric things that you're going to use maybe once in a blue moon. And if you try to read the whole documentation of what's going on, you're going to get lost. And you're going to get hung up trying to figure out what this explanation is telling you about a feature you're never going to use. So I just wanted to talk about the features that I thought most programmers should and would use day to day. So I did the talk again the next year, and I talked about Perl 5.12 for everyday use. Same thing, same kind of changes. And then again for 5.14. And I started to work before submission period on Perl 5.16 for the working programmer. And it's the same idea. Like, what are the changes in 5.16 that you really want to know about? And I was kind of perversely pleased to find out that there weren't that many of them. 5.16 has scads of changes and almost entirely improvements, but many of them are bug fixes. There are changes to edge behavior. There are improvements that are really great that they're there, but most people aren't going to care. They're not going to affect their daily lives except for occasionally making some stupid thing not happen that they probably never noticed before. And I didn't have enough material to talk about 5.16. And I hate 20-minute slots. I don't like doing them. So I said, I'm just going to do the whole thing, which I still think makes a lot of sense because how many people here, first of all, how many people here use Perl at work, like to do your job? Right, so almost everybody. And how many of you day to day are using 5.8?
Woo! Yeah.
Yeah, right? It's oodles of stuff. And how many people are using 5.10? Right, so there's a lot of stuff that you're not getting to use. And maybe you already know about it, and all you want to do is hear me talk about the features and tell you like the glowing terms and the warm feelings they give me, and you'll get to have that. But if you're using 5.8 or 5.10, and you haven't gotten to see all the cool reasons that you should be running 5.16, I want to get into that. Not just 16, but also 14, 12, 10. And in some cases, 5.8.9. Anybody here running 5.8.9 in production? Yeah, one. 5.8.9 ends up getting a couple features from 5.10 put back into it for cuz. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to go into this in depth, is we've added Lexical Semantics. And the name alone is kind of nasty. What this really means is something we've been working on for a while. The feature bundles. Right? We add new features that only work if you've said you want to use them. Really popular one, and I'm going to spoil slides that are coming up later. We've got a routine called say. Say string. Prints it out, and it prints a new line. Great. But we were nervous about just clobbering people's existing say routines. So what we did is we said you have to say that you want say. And the way you do that is by saying use feature say. And we had a bunch of these, and we finally decided if you say that you want version 5.10, we're going to give you all the features that 5.10 introduced. And the same in 5.12 and so on. And in 5.16, we've sort of nailed down what it means, what the scope is. And the import of this is not that you need to understand most of this stuff. I think most people will find it straightforward. And if you don't, please tell me. Tom is hiding his hands, I think, because he doesn't find it straightforward and he hates it. Well, all I'm going is to say that some of the things that we're going to see here, you need to say use 5.16.0. You need to say use 5.14.0. And I'm not going to get into this. What I'm going to say to sum up the whole thing, because I'm just trying to cover the things you want to get the job done, is that when you are using a version of Perl, you should specify the version that you need and that you are expecting at the top of your program. You should say use 5.12.0, use 5.16.0. This is telling Perl, this is the version I'm expecting. Please try to behave as much like it as you can. Okay? Now I really want to talk about cool new features. And this is one of my top 3 features in the last couple years. Say you have a piece of code like this. Right? You've got a string, and when you run the program, you get this error message. Right? Use of uninitialized value in concatenation. Okay, well, which one? And especially if, one of them is an empty string. So you look at the output, you don't know what the heck happened. As of 5.10, you get that. I mean, it's a little thing, but these little...
Only when you use curly quotes?
Only when you use an interpolating string. Yeah. If you use a non-interpolating string, it's going to have no warning at all, which is but that behavior goes back quite a ways. This is it's a nice little change, but these little changes I think we're going to see throughout the talk. These are the changes that really make the improvements. A lot of the bigger stuff, you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to make heads or tails of some of these big changes, and we have yet to figure out whether they're awesome or terrible. This is just straight up awesome. State variables. So you've written some code, and you've got some kind of global variable, and you want to protect that variable. You don't want anybody screwing around with how many lines are left. So the obvious thing to do here is make it lexical. All right, now you've greatly reduced the scope in which this variable is visible. But the problem is, right, somebody writes a subroutine under that one, they can still see your variable. They can watch it, they know what it's doing, they can change it, and you got to keep it safe, right? You don't want your variables changing. Mutable state is the enemy in your program. So what do? You wrap it in this. And this breaks one of my cardinal rules, which is thou shalt not start a subroutine outside of column 0. Because when you grep, you grep for your named subroutines with, caret sub. And that's just how it works. So Perl 5.10 also gives you this guy, state variables. That state variable, it's going to keep its value through invocations. It's like one of the static variables in C. You've in many ways built a closure here without having to go through the nonsense of adding extra braces and saying my and keeping track of why you've done that. It's very clear why you've done it. You've made a state variable. It holds its state. Really nice stuff. And by the way, if my explanations don't make any sense or you don't understand what I'm going on about, please just wave your hand and tell me, because I know I'm going through a lot of this stuff quickly because there's a lot of stuff to go through.
So if you use warnings, do you get a message there because you don't have a my on line?
No, state is implicitly my. It makes a lexical variable that retains its state. So state is lexical, and of course there's no need for an our state because they're shared. Okay, another really, really nice little change. So we've got some code, and it does this. All right, I've written this code a million zillion times, but the problem is some things are free, right? Some things have a cost of 0. I'm sorry, sometimes we're giving things away for free, so amount is 0. But now we can't give it away for free because 0 is false, so we put the cost in there. And so we end up writing this guy. We have to check that it's defined. But, boy, that was weird, sorry. We want to check this guy is defined. Well, in 5.10, we let you take that operator and kind of say, I don't really mean true, I mean defined. So any place, yes?
A question about this when you're done with this section.
Okay. This operator acts just like, for very, very large values of just like, that ternary, right, where we're saying, is the thing defined? If so, it, otherwise the other thing. Now, here I've got a composed operator, right? We're saying assign to the thing on the left unless it's already defined, even if it's a false defined value. From all the people I talk to who use 5.10 and later in production, this is the most cited thing people like in the new Perl. Yeah, it's a goofy little change, but you can use it for all kinds of stuff. There was a question.
Is there talk of expanding this logic to include
So the question was, are we going to extend this to have operators or behavior for existence or length? No. There was talk. There was actually talk of an exists or operator, and the basic decision was you don't need it enough to be worth the increased complexity of reading the code. I have not seen anyone talk about a lengthish version of it, but there are some improvements to length that I'll talk about later that make it at least a little less needed or less wanted. Okay, right, so instead of writing this guy, you could write this. Boop. Great. Say. I already talked about say. I spoiled this section, but I'm going to go over it again because say is pretty great. Say is a new built-in, and it's just like print, but it tacks on a new line. So you used to do print this, print that, print these. And now you can save 4 characters, save 6 characters, save 9 characters, which is, it adds up. And beyond that, it makes things simpler to read by getting rid of these double quotes, worrying about the syntax highlighting and whether things are going to look right, which I obsess about, making all the colors right in my editor. It makes your code just a little easier to use. At the beginning, when 5.10 was coming out, I thought this was dumb. I thought it was fluff. I didn't see the value. I'm still maybe on the fence, but I will say I use it all the time. I use say like a crazy person. Yes, question.
It's literally a new line, it's not $.
It's.
That might sound
Is it?
That bites you anyway. Yes, it's screwed up.
Oh, Tom is saying that it is a literal new line, which is interesting because the instructions, if you have, this is getting off topic, the instructions if you have a tied file handle are to use $/, the output line separator. Well, that's terrible, and maybe we'll consider that a bug, and you should file a bug and we'll discuss it on the list, but not now because I've got a lot of slides left. Okay. Oh yeah, so if you want to write this, the time I use say the most is when I'm writing one-liners, right? I don't know about you, but the way I used to always write my one-liners was with Perl-LE, right? Stick on an extra new line when you print, and then evaluate my code. You don't need that L if you have say, but you don't have say unless you use feature say. But instead of saying Perl E, you can say Perl E. And the capital guy says, I want you to evaluate this with as many features as you got, or basically all the features in the current version of Perl. So, over time, the definition of what that is going to do can change, but this is, at least in my mind, Perl E is for writing one-liners. You're not writing this code to stand the test of the ages. So, okay. Okay, moving on. Recursion. I can't talk about computer programming without talking about recursion. Oh, I'm not taking that. And of course, the example I have to use is factorial because I don't know how to do any other recursion. And the way it works is we've written a subroutine called fact, which gives us factorial, and it's a lousy factorial, but let's pretend it's good. And it's going to call itself, right? If the input wasn't 1, then return the input times itself minus 1. And it can do that because it knows its name. Right, everybody can see. Is this clear to everybody? Okay. But I don't want to make a named subroutine. I want a callback, or I want a private, a lexical subroutine that I can just kind of use briefly and throw away. This doesn't need to live forever. So it's easy, right? I write this. Instead of saying sub fact, I say my fact equals this sub, and then it calls itself. But it doesn't work, right? Because $fact isn't available when this last line of code is evaluated. $fact hasn't sprung into existence yet. So it's going to get there and it's going to say, well, I don't know what this $fact thing is that you're talking about. Like there's no variable, and it's going to fail to compile. But that's okay, because you could write this. First I'll make the variable, then I'll assign to it, and it will be able to refer to itself. But the problem is you've built a closure over itself, and that, by referring to itself, means you're never going to get rid of the subroutine. It's going to live in memory forever. But that's okay, because you can fix it just with this simple code. And unless you're on Debian, it will probably work. No, I'm kidding. I love Debian. Well, this has been fixed by a feature that I thought was surprising in its contentiousness. If you use 5.16, you get this guy. Just like under package or under line, it gives you the currently executing subroutine. So you can write this just the way you wanted to. You don't even need a name for the thing. You don't need a variable to store it in, a lexical variable like that. You could pass it around completely anonymously, and it will properly be able to call itself recursively. $sub or under sub under evaluates to a reference to the currently executing sub, which is killer useful. Time will tell, but I think this is my favorite new thing in 5.16. How do you memorize that? I think you can, but ask me later when I have more time to think about it. That's a good question. File handles. State variable. Yes. Yes.
I was just wondering, if you didn't have that special sub keyword, would it be possible to use the caller function to get?
No. The caller won't do it for you because caller there, I think caller there is going to be a string something like anon, because yeah, it's going to be a string that can't resolve to anything. Caller doesn't have that information, and one of the points of contention was this information belongs in caller, but the caller routine already returns a list of I think 92 elements, and adding more is no. It's like I think it's 14 or 10. I don't know. It's too many.
It might be useful to have more, say, if you have a double recursive situation where two need to keep calling each other back and forth.
Maybe, yeah. There are places to improve on this, but this is already pretty sweet. Anybody else? Oh yes, in the back.
2 seconds, I just wanted to add that we don't have yet tail call optimization here.
Yes, it's true. We don't have tail.
But we will have it in 5.18 probably.
Do you think so? That'd be nice. We don't have tail call. So the comment was we don't have tail call optimization yet. Tail call optimization is something we don't have in the core anywhere in Perl, and it would be nice to have. I got to say, I'll believe it when I see it, but I also am very eager to see it. So we'll see what happens. Okay, next up, I want to talk about file handles. 5.10 brings into the core AutoDie. AutoDie is some good stuff. AutoDie is like fatal. If you don't know what fatal is, it means more or less that when you do file operations or some other operations that would normally return a false value to tell you something didn't work, it will die instead. I'm simplifying, but this is the most common way to use it. So you say something like, please open this file, and it would return false, but now it's going to throw an exception. So normally, this is what people normally write. They open something, they read from it, and they close it. What they should write has been this. Right? Open it, and if you couldn't open it, die, right? You can't just keep going. And then read from it, and when you're done, close it. And I'm opening this to write to, and then I'm reading from it. This is not what people should usually write. Yeah, yes, right. If Keynote supported Perl warnings, but you get the point, right? I should be writing to it there, and then we close it, and we should say if you couldn't close it, die, because the output's not safely written out. Well, with AutoDie, ta-da, you get rid of those, and they are implicit. There's an implicit or die on open. There's an implicit. Oh, here I throw in some extra stuff. There's, we can say no AutoDie, and then remove directory, which normally would have returned false or true, still will. We don't actually need it in this case, but we can turn off AutoDie lexically, which is really, really nice. We can also turn it on lexically. So we can just say, right here, I know that I'm going to do a bunch of stuff that could fail. Just AutoDie right here. Everywhere else, I know that I've done the correct thing. There are two problems with AutoDie, and I got to say they're pretty big ones. The first one is AutoDie does not affect print, basically because print is very special. Now, can print fail? Yeah, it actually can. It's pretty rare, and you'll usually catch it later, but print can fail. But that's not the biggest problem. Okay, we'll talk later. Tom says, well, we'd always catch it later. And Tom's probably right. He's usually right when I'm wrong. But you have to close file handles explicitly. And this is huge, because one of the awesomest things about lexical file handles is that you don't have to worry about closing them, except you really, really do, because when they close automatically, when they're garbage collected, they don't throw an exception. So you always have to remember, close it. You don't have to say close or die with AutoDie, but you do have to say close it. Later in 5.14, we get cool stuff with IO file. All right, so if you used to write this, right, I'm going to open stuff, and unbelievable. I'd like to take a moment to point out that my job with Perl is primarily administrative. I don't actually write the code you guys are running. So for those of you who are totally bewildered, I've opened it for reading now, and now I'm printing to it. Anyway, yes, right. So this should fail, right? In 5.10 we got AutoDie. In 5.14, and we could also say this, right? I'm going to use IO file, and then when I open my file handle, I can call methods on it. I really like this. I like it because it gets rid of the so-called indirect object notation. All right, when you say print file handle stuff, it's the same thing as saying file handle arrow print stuff. And I like things to look samey. Not everybody has to agree, right? There's reasons to do it and reasons to not like it, but I like it. And in 5.14, you can get rid of that use IO file, and these methods will work automatically. So you open your file handles, and you can treat them like objects. Or more importantly, you can write code that just expects to get past something that acts like a handle, and it will work even if you pass in a plain old open file handle. The problem is AutoDie, which let you get rid of that, is not going to let you get rid of that because AutoDie affects close. Like when you say close file handle. When you say file handle arrow close, AutoDie is not kicking in there. So you need to mix, or you need to pick. You need to pick whether you want AutoDie or whether you want to treat stuff like handles. That's all I have to say about file handles. So questions before I move on? Chris? Could you write AutoDie hints to make that work? I think so. I think that some things need to change in how we're doing some of this stuff in general. But yeah, I think it could probably be made to work with AutoDie. And Paul is here, and Paul might have an answer. Larry?
Yeah, the Perl 6 approach to this would be that it returns an unthrown exception, but if you use it in a void context, then it would throw.
That's interesting. So Larry says the way that you would do this in Perl 6 is you would return an unthrown exception, but if you were in void context, it would be fatal. And that's basically what use fatal and use AutoDie did. But yeah, if you, that's a generic Perl 6 behavior. Yeah, that's nice.
Is there an auto croak in the works?
No, but there's use carp always. Randall, there is no auto croak. The which one? Oh, the one with armeder, yeah. 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 I gotta say, my code slide. Okay, we gotta keep moving. Gotta keep moving. Package blocks. These are pretty cool. So this is how people write packages now. I've got a package, and it's got a version, and it's got some code in it. Hooray! In 5.14, it became possible to say this. I've got a package with the version, and then everything goes inside of this block. So you've instead of having to put a bare block around your package, the package names the block, which I like, except that we go back to that rule that I talked about earlier about where you can start subroutines. It makes me really cranky. And the place where this is useful is when you're declaring packages inside of other packages. That's the place I find it most useful. And we don't do that a lot in Perl. But the great thing about this is, the thing that makes me really happy, is that 1, 2, 3, 4 there is validated. right? You can put any garbage you want into our dollar version, right? You can say our dollar version equals my mom is a lovely woman, and it works. You know, like your code will run until something tries to treat it like a version, and everything explodes. If you try doing that with this syntax, that is a compile time error. It says, dude, that's not a version, man. Just make it a version. But but you don't have to use the thing that I don't like. Maybe you like this, and if you like it, that's cool. But if you're like me and you don't like this indentiness, you can still say this. I'm declaring my package, here's its version, and then it acts just like the old package but gets you the validated version number, which I really, really like doing. Pause has some bugs recognizing this now, but they've just started affecting me, and I hack on Pause sometimes. So hopefully I'll get to fix it. Yes?
If you use Distilla, for example, to set all your version numbers in your packages, doesn't make as much difference, right?
It's right. If you're using Distilla to set up your packages and you're using its most common way to declare your variables, it is pre-validating it for you. But I use stuff outside of Distilla too, and I'm very happy to have this. Overloading. This is my one slide on overloading. Overloading is both fantastic and horrible, and in 5.16 it's even more. We get some new overloads. You can overload objects for file tests. So you can say if someone asks whether I'm a regular file, if someone asks what my size is, you can give answers. You can overload QR, which means if someone tries to use me like a regular expression, this is how you should behave. There's a new pragma called no overloading, which lets you say in a lexical scope, please don't overload, right? If objects in here would be affected by overloading, don't. You should use this rarely, very rarely, but when you need to use it, holy cow is it useful. And how long did it take us to get this, right? If you try declaring an overload on your package that doesn't exist, right? Like you try overloading the question mark operator, it'll tell you. It's going to say, dude, there's no question mark operator. Fix it. We just added that. Okay, that's it for overloading. So those are all the cool features, and now I want to talk about some other new features. SmartMatch! Yay! Okay, so SmartMatch was supposed to let you say, if X matches Y. And for any kind of X and any kind of Y, it would give you an answer that made sense. The problem is there's just not always an answer that makes sense. And if there's an answer that might make sense, it's very often not the answer everyone expects. It's an answer, it's like, this joke is really funny after I explain it to you. It's an answer that could make sense. Yeah, it's one possible answer. So it became very surprising. And what made it even more surprising is that right here, if Y, all the matching is determined by the right-hand side, mostly. And if Y was a literal, you'd have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. But if you don't know what X and Y are, there's 23 possible behaviors, right, how that's going to work. And some of those behaviors redispatch recursively. So like you've got two inputs, what's going to happen? And like, no, you're not going to remember them. You're not going to remember what these all do. So the SmartMatch behavior has become problematic, and we've changed its behavior at least 2 and maybe 3 times since it was introduced, because we just keep finding stuff that doesn't make sense. It's a bad feature. I think it can be redeemed by cutting out large portions of its cortex. But my advice here is don't use it. Don't use it right now. Also, it gave us a switch statement, right? After all these years, Perl got a switch statement, and you really shouldn't use it. There's 2 reasons. Sorry? It can be fine with literals, except except the problem, the main problem with literals is people are surprised by the behavior of numbers and strings together, because some people say obviously it should be string-wise equality, and some people say obviously it should be numeric equality. Container literals become a problem because you have to remember what the containers do. Simple scalars as your when clauses are okay. You're not really getting that much from all of its power then. Also, given is like 4. It's a 4 for the switch. And it's going to put $x into the topic, but not the normal topic you're used to. It puts it into a lexical topic, my $_. And then if you write any subroutines like these guys that are going to close over the topic, they'll now close over the topic. You don't close over the topic. If you write this subroutine, in normal Perl land, that $_ would mean a global variable, $_. But if you've got a lexical topic in place, you've just made a closure, and it's going to look at the lexical $_, which is not the exception that you'd expect from this try block. And this, you guys seen scanners? So please don't use this. Again, this is another feature that maybe can be saved. I don't think the feature is a bad idea. I think that it's got a number of severe implementation problems. But until they're fixed, just say no. Each array. I like this guy too. I like it a lot. It lets you say, for my index value equals each array, or while. Well, not for. So it lets you do just like you'd say each hash. You can say each array. I like that. The problem is it suffers from the same problem as each hash, which is the iterator is in an inconvenient place. If you don't know what this means, I got to not talk about it. But the short answer is you shouldn't have been using each hash either. Okay, we got this guy too. Push $arrayref a list. So the idea was you could push onto an array reference. You could splice an array reference. This is called the AutoDie behavior. Because it'll automatically dereference these things by figuring out what it should be. Now, it's not really called the AutoDie behavior. It's called either the AutoDie feature or the AutoDie bug, depending on to whom you're speaking. There's a lot to be said for like the ugliness this feature can get rid of, but there's also stuff to be said about different kinds of ugliness that it introduces, and the future of this feature is unclear. So I suggest not relying on it. Okay, bug fixes. The Y2038 bug has been fixed. Yeah, which is great. Whoa, my screen just went crazy. It used to be that 2 to the 32nd minus 1 was January 18th, 2038, and 1 second later, was 1901. And now, it's not. Now it's actually 1 second later. This bug mattered to me last week when somebody wanted to pay for POBOX service 50 years in advance. And the old billing system couldn't do it. The new billing system can because of this fix. Fantastic. $@, right? So everybody uses try tiny, right? Right? Good. But this actually makes changes to $@ make try tiny also more reliable. Because, okay, so first we have to talk about eval. Eval's really bad. I use eval all the time. Mostly I use try tiny. But it's got this problem in it that used to plague me. And the problem is, let's walk through this code. We've got a package X. And whenever an object of X is destroyed, it evals something. Here it's evaling nothing, but we can just pretend whatever we want is in there. And then we've got an object of that class. And we do some stuff with it, which here is nothing. And then there's a fatal exception. Like something really bad happens. And we leave that exit block. And what are we expecting to see? We're expecting to see error, death. But it's not what we see. We see no error. Because the eval in the destroy method clobbered $@. Now, out of curiosity, who here has been bitten by this bug? That's a bunch of people. And I'm gonna be a jerk and suggest that some of you have been bitten by this bug and you don't even know it. You had some kind. It didn't work 3 times in a row, and then it worked again. I don't know what happened. I've spent literally several full work days tracking things down that turned out to be this bug. Brutal bug. And in 5.14, it's gone. In 5.14, you get the exception. That's great. Okay, this is another little one. This is a really nice one, though. Who here knows $X? Chris? Yeah, okay, so this is maybe a less commonly used feature. $X contains the name of your Perl interpreter, right? So very often it's going to be Perl. Depending on how you ran the program, it might be user bin Perl. On a bunch of platforms now, we use the operating system's process table, and we can tell you the actual path to the binary that's being run. which is really nice when you need to pay attention to this and you don't want to jump through hoops using find bin and then trying to inspect the process table yourself. It stinks. This just takes care of it. It works, I think, it definitely works in Solaris and Mac OS, and I think it works on BSDs. Yes. Chris is going to look into it. Meanwhile, we're going to soldier on. We've got 15 minutes left. Yeah, a question?
Was your text getting darker than it was before? Because it seems a bit harder to read than a few minutes.
I don't think it has. Hold on. Oh, that didn't help at all. I thought maybe I could dim the lights. Yeah, I'm sorry. If something is unclear, holler and I will read it aloud. Chris, yes?
Yes, it is functioning on FreeBSD 5.
Wonderful. Works on, so the $X is improved on FreeBSD. Okay, moving on. Strings. I use strings a lot in Perl. I don't know about you. Perl is good at Unicode. Perl's actually really good at Unicode. And Perl 5.16 is better than any previous Perl. First of all, we got Unicode 6.1, which is a lot of characters. It's like a whole lot of characters. And you can get every character property from them. Now, this isn't everyday Perl for everyone, but for those of you who have to deal with text and Unicode text and really figuring out what the heck is going on with it, this is really useful stuff. Also, $X, if you have to deal with this, these are graphemes. It makes a lot more sense. Graphemes are composed characters. If you don't know what they are, you don't care. If you do know what they are, you're probably already smiling. The Unicode bug. Unicode bug's a really nice bug. And the bug is, well, it wasn't originally a bug, right? Originally this thing was a feature, and the idea was if you have a string and you try, let's say, matching a regex against it, whether it's treated as bytes or as characters, as text, depended on stuff. Like a bunch of conditions kind of put together, and they all kind of seem like they make sense, but it can seem unpredictable when you're just trying to do your job. And the fix in 5, 12, 14, and 16 over and over has been to let you say, when I try to do string stuff, it's character strings. Don't care about whether everything in it is under code point 255. Don't care where it comes from. Just treat it like text. Again, this bug can cause really, really stupid, nasty behaviors, especially because it's affected by I/O. Right? You're getting input from somewhere. How do you reproduce the bug? Well, you get the same input. Good luck. If you say use feature Unicode strings or use 512, I think everything that we know about will now treat your strings like text, like character text, solving innumerable bugs, or probably numerable bugs that I haven't counted. More stringy stuff. Eval. So when you say eval string, are you evaling a sequence of octets, or are you evaling text? Now, the first answer is, well, they're the same thing in Perl. But it matters, because what if somewhere in there you've got use UTF-8? Right? Does that mean you should take the stuff that's in the array of code points in $string and treat it like UTF-8 now? Or does it just mean that it was pre-decoded and it's okay, you can ignore the use UTF? It's totally, totally nutty. So in new Perl, you get eval bytes saying, I've got a string, please treat it like octets and evaluate it. So you can load something from disk, not worrying about its encoding yourself, load the bytes from disk, and tell Perl, treat this like you would have treated it if you had opened it yourself. And you get Unicode eval, where you say, I've read this from disk, I dealt with the encoding, this is a string, evaluate that. So you can specifically say which behavior you want. I think I probably said them backwards. I'm sorry, Unicode eval, this is a very unclear slide. Unicode eval is a feature. So if you use feature Unicode eval, eval expects strings. And if you want byte semantics, you say eval bytes. Yeah, thank you for asking. I didn't repeat the question, but the answer makes it obvious, right? Okay. Questions? Okay. So I talked about some of my other favorite features. I think my favorite 512ism relates to something that came up earlier, which is length. if you ran this code in old Perl and that hash entry was undefined, you would get a warning. Because length on undefined issues this warning. That's just how it goes. Also, that's too many lines in your program. Please cut it down. In 512, you get no warning because length on undefined returns undefined. You're still going to get a warning if you try using it like a number, because using undefined as a number is a warning. But the idea that length has to return a number is gone. And this deals with a whole bunch of times when you would have said, if defined x and length x, you can get rid of that first part. It's just a nice change, right? A lot less. It's a significant amount of code I don't write.
Does it auto-vivify an email with a hash?
It does whatever it did before. You like that? Okay. We get a new escape dude, \O for octal strings. All right, so I really love Perl. The reason we want this is because if you tried saying that the old way, you'd get some garbage like that. Because your octal escape could only be 3 digits long. In fact, I think it's even worse than that. I've already forgotten the old behavior, except that I danced on its grave a little bit, and now I always use I don't use \O, I use \x. Okay, let's face it. But if you need octal, you can do it really nicely now. Okay. Yeah, this guy also does something crazy and stupid. We also lets us fix this problem. This is not a real regex from work. I admit I made this up. But like, what does this thing do? Yeah, if you sit down and think about it, and you can solve this. But boy, it stinks. And if you don't know what stinks is sometimes those \/ numbers mean octal character. Sometimes they mean a capture group, and sometimes they mean throw an exception because I don't know what to do. I don't know, man. But if he was here today, so what we get in new Perl is this: \O if you want octal, \G if you want a capture group. Those capture groups work with negatives too, which is pretty sweet. Okay, keep going. So Unicode 6.1, it gets us a whole bunch of characters. It gets us like this guy and astronomy and massages and little birds, and they're kind of looking around, and they're looking at you, and you got some dinner, and it was really good, and so very, very valuable features. I actually use this every day. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that already. But with this, now this is actually really nice. \big N for getting named Unicode characters loads all the character names when it needs to. So you can just use it. I never need to stop and run my program and see that it failed because it doesn't know the character name of Heavy Black Heart. And it'll load this. Now it'll just load it automatically and work. Also, there's a typo here because this is supposed to say I love Queensryche, and I have forgotten the Queens. Okay, case folding. So everyone here, I am sure, has written this. Take 2 strings and compare them without respect to case. But that's not what this really says. This says convert them both to lowercase. And that's different than without respect to case. Not in English, not in the English that you learn in primary school. What you really want to do is fold case. And if you can't see, I've replaced the LCs with FCs. To give you an example of why this matters, right? That's a sigma, and that's a sigma, and that's a sigma. Lowercase sigma is lowercase sigma. Uppercase sigma is uppercase sigma. Lowercase sigma, or folded case sigma, is a different lowercase sigma. Whoa! That's because the one on the left is only used when you're at the end of a word. But if you want to compare these things without respect to case, you got to squish them down even further than lowercase. You got to squish them down to fold case. And this happens in other languages too, right? Here's some German. Okay. Also, we get \L, right? Or we have \L. Great little guy. For saying you want to lowercase everything that comes after you. And \F now lets you fold case everything that comes after you. It's useful. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm long on slides and short on time, so I'm going to go even faster unless somebody says stop. Okay, we get named captures. Named captures are great. And yes, finally catching up with .NET. So we've got a really, really stupid file format, and it looks like this. Section : property equals value. And we used to write this guy, which is okay. It's not that bad. I mean, the bad stuff is not is not the capture groups. But you can imagine what this looks like when we're actually parsing something big and complicated. It's a nightmare to remember. How many else here like finds themselves using their fingers to count the bananas and figure out what capture group they're on? Yeah, right. It's the left parentheses. Now you say this. The thing I'm capturing here is the section. The thing I'm capturing here is the name. The thing I'm capturing here is the value. And then later you pull them out of %+, which stores the named captures. Really, really useful. Okay, I'm glad I got to this, because this is probably my single favorite change in the last couple of releases. More so than that undef thing that I was lying about earlier. Everybody probably understands this. Get some string and then, hack off part of it. Hack off everything after the first dot. Fine. But these things should combine, and so people write this. I write this all the time, but it doesn't work because there's a precedence issue. You need to do this, and I gotta say, like, explaining this, having to add those parentheses takes it from simple, obvious feature to slightly weird incantation. Why do I need those parentheses again? In 5.14, you get the R modifier. And R says, don't modify the result in place, return the new value. This is awesome. Yeah. And like, for example, this guy, right? We want short names. And we're going to get the short names by mapping the substitution over the long names. Okay, well, the problem is the S operator returns whether it did anything. So now short names is going to be like true and false values, which is not useful. So that's okay, you do this, right? Do the substitution and then return the topic. But now you've altered long names. Like, why didn't you just use for? Okay, that's cool, we'll do this. Right? We're going to copy it, and we're going to fix that and return that. Well, in 5.14, you can just say this. Yeah, it's huge. Okay, there's a bunch of other regex modifiers. I got 5 minutes? All right. So here we're trying to do some theoretical matching. First question is, does, I think that's a Malayalam digit 5, does that match digit? Does an eth match word character? Eth is an Old English letter, which I sorely miss. Does the FF ligature match FF, the two characters, case insensitively? And does that ligature have the letter property? I'm missing a backslash before that P. That's the only error in these slides, so give me a break. So the current behavior, if you say use 5.16, is things act like they have the /u modifier. Use Unicode meanings. And in that case, yes, a Malayalam digit is a digit. Old English character, an Old English letter is a word character. A ligature does match its component letters if you case fold it. But that's not what people expect, right? That's not what many people expect. It's what linguists expect, and I don't really think linguists have any place in Perl. So A says I want ASCII-ish semantics, and that means \D matches ASCII digits, \W matches ASCII word characters. But that ligature thing is still going to match, right? And this can confuse you depending on what you're trying to match. So then you can say, no, really ASCII. But that letter thing, the property is still going to match. Who knows which of these is the default in Perl 5.8? Anyone have a guess? None. None of these is the default. The actual default behavior is that you will get behavior based on the I Ching reading at the time of the string match. It's really kooky. And there's also \L or /L, which says use your locale settings. Just don't do it. Just don't. But how do you make this guy go away? How do you make that property letter? I don't want to allow any non-ASCII character to match. Everything in this string has to be ASCII. It's very easy. What you do is you say, throw an exception if there's something that isn't ASCII, and then match the string, right? We're doing character semantics. Ligatures are characters. Deal with it. Okay, some of this means the stringification of regexes has changed, right? Now we get this question hat U thing. Oh man, I'm so out of time. I'm going to fly through this, and if you want to get up and leave, go for it. But I want to go through my other slides. What? Oh, there's talking here? Oh, yeah. Okay, so study. If you know what study is, study's old behavior was to make your code slower and wrong. Study's new behavior is to do nothing except for look pretty. We have some new stuff in the core, like JSON. JSON's in the core, hooray! We got rid of some stuff, like switch, and all the old Perl 4 libraries. They're still on the CPAN, they're still there, it's cool, but they're not in the core anymore. We no longer allow you to pretend that you're writing Pascal. We require that you put parens here. This is actually there's no joke, this is for real. You have to, except I would never cancel my season pass to Smallville. You now need to put parens there. For a long time you didn't, but that was allowed because of a goofy parser hack. That's all the stuff that got removed. Oh, except for this. You used to be able to say this, right? Match foo / sand. Like, what's the end modifier there? It's not. It's actually s and bar. Who needs white space? That's gonna become fatal in 5.18. $left bracket. Isn't $left bracket? That's so that you can say the first element of an array is 1. No. Yes, this is the warning I proposed. We're getting rid of this. This has caused some consternation. The issue is there's never been a really good definition of what defined at array means, and people have used it to think that it means other things than it does. So now it's issuing a warning, and I'm hoping we can get rid of it. And when we do that, some of the very few nits in the // defined or operator will go away. But this is very speculative. That's it. Okay, that's all my slides. I can take any questions, and I will say that if you want to know what's going to happen in the future of Perl, maybe, depending on how accurate my crystal ball is, I'll be talking about that tomorrow. Any questions? No? Thank you very much. Goodbye.